Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to day two of the sixth edition of Nasscom Big Data Analytics Summit. A warm welcome, everybody out there. For those who have missed the session yesterday, my name is Syed. I take the privilege of being the host of the day. Today is going to be a lot different. We have lined up some interesting, very interesting discussions for you. And finally, to cap it up, we have millennials to close our event. As we move on to day two, ladies and gentlemen, a humble request. A request? No, an order. Please put your phones in silent mode, or it's good, switch it off. Let's put that. Please, first it was an order, next it's a request. Please put your phones into silent mode. The opening session of day two will dwell upon democratizing AI to enable better data, creating a virtuous circle of capability. This session would look at what? If you're asking me what? Using data science and artificial intelligence towards improving data so that we can do more meaningful AI. Why? Why the session? Having more meaningful AI in place enables human the flexibility and time to evolve in more significant way. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite on stage the panel moderator, Mr. Nitin, the CEO of ItGetO. Let's clap loud and welcome him. A little introduction about Mr. Nitin. Nitin has a unique combination of experiences as an entrepreneur, management consultant, and as an industry leader. He has an outstanding track record of transformational impact across situations, dramatically rising the tragedy of businesses, driving the strategy and execution, championing innovation, building high performances, team coaching, and inspiring leaders, and leading with passion and integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, in his previous role, Nitin was the Chief Operating Officer of Flipkart, where he was responsible to customer and supply chain operations, strategy to execution, capabilities, and corporate function. For the company, he has also held Fidelity International as an MD and country head for India. Prior to Fidelity, Nitin was the director of McKinsey Global Knowledge Center in India. Post his tenure with McKinsey, Nitin set up Active Karma Ventures, an internet company with a mission was to help India lead a more active and healthy life by leveraging both online and offline channels. He holds an MBA, major in finance and operation from Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow, and a degree in engineering, BTech from Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Let's give a big round of applause for him. That was a long introduction, sir. Calling on the other panelists on stage, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Christina Clark, the Chief Data Officer of GE Power. Let's give a big round of applause for her and welcome. We've got Rohit Jain, Senior Director, Product Management, Walmart Labs with us. Clap loud for him, please. And along with us, we've got Sonu Wadali, the Head of C&D Labs Future Group. Let's give a bigger round of applause. It's over to you, Mr. Nitin. I would request you to please take it forward. And also I'd request the panelists to please introduce yourself. Take it over, Mr. Nitin.
Good morning. Come on, we did such a nice football wave. There should be a lot more energy. Good morning. Okay, this is better. Yesterday was a great day for sports. We had a fantastic football match. Some outstanding Wimbledon matches. Unfortunately, my favorite, Roger Federer, lost, but that's okay. Life has to go on. Okay, coming to this session, it's did you get the title of this session? Yes? No? Yes? You are smarter than me because it took me quite some time. I think, when I got the request to moderate this session, I read that title like 4 or 5 times because, it was such a long title, Democratizing AI, using data to then kickstart a virtuous cycle of capability. It took me a long time, and then number of discussions with my esteemed panelists here to really decode it. So what is this session about? What is this session about? This session is less about strategy, more about execution. Yeah. So we are now in the second generation of AI. Over the last couple of years, we had the first generation. There was a lot of excitement, overexcitement around the potential and the promise of AI. It's going to change the world. Yeah, the most significant technology, invention, innovation that humankind has seen. Probably true. We are now in the second generation, the second phase, where it is now about execution. What do we do with AI? Where do we implement this? And as that is happening, what we are finding, what enterprises are finding, is that there is a big challenge. There's a big challenge, and that big challenge is data availability and data quality. Yeah? Because for AI to be effective, it has to be built on the bedrock of high-quality data. You understand that to really tune your machine learning algorithms, you need a certain data size and you need a certain data quality. And today, that's a huge challenge. That's a huge challenge, which is impeding the march of AI. I was recently reading a Harvard Business Review article around data quality, and some of the statistics there were shocking. They were shocking. That research said that only 3% of company data which is there meets the data quality standards. 3%. Even if that research is off by a significant percentage, it's still shocking. 3%. Yeah? It had another interesting factoid that only 47% of new data records created have a critical error. Critical error. Yeah? So data is a huge challenge. Yeah? And unless we address this challenge of data quality, we will not realize the potential of AI. Now, the good news is that data quality, which used to be grunge work, which used to be lowest end of the food chain and not very sexy, yeah, AI in itself can really make this whole process of driving data quality a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. Yeah? And as we do that, that can really put in place a virtuous cycle. You use AI to improve data quality, and you have good quality data that can enable more effective AI applications. Yeah? That is really the concept that we are trying to bring out in this session. I have with me three really outstanding leaders, professional. Christina, Chief Data Officer at GE Power, been with GE for 18 years, started as a finance professional and has then dedicated herself to data. So she brings a very rich perspective. And I'm going to, just in a quick minute, request Christina to share the big picture around AI and how data fits into that equation. Somu is the Chief Data Officer of Future Group, one of India's largest conglomerates, focused on retail, but other businesses, has moved to India more recently, 3 months back, Somu, and is realizing the wonderful world of data in India. Data, generally, this 3% statistic that was a Harvard Business Review study, I'm sure that's not for India. I would think that the statistic for India would be even more glamorous. Yeah? And Rohit Jain, Rohit is from Walmart, so you can see there's a very nice parallel on this panel, Walmart, Flipkart, Future, but that's not what the discussion is about. So Rohit leads retail technology at Walmart, and interestingly, before Walmart, he spent his career at Amazon. So talk about competition, talk about competition. So that's a great panel that we have. So the way we are going to run this is that each of my colleagues here are going to make a 5-minute presentation, yeah, and then we'll get into a panel discussion and then open up for Q&A. Christina will talk about the big picture of AI. Somu will get us a level down into some of the data challenges, and then how do you really address data quality. And then Somu will bring all of this to life. Rohit will bring all of this to life by using a couple of case studies from supply chain technology to make this all real for us. Okay, Christina, over to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today, and I'm especially excited to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is a robust data foundation. And I know you're probably sitting there thinking, wait a minute, I thought this conference was about AI, and I promise we're going to get there. So first, let me just take a step back. First of all, everybody knows how important data is. There's lots of dramatic comparisons drawn to data being the new oil or the new gold. And I understand why those comparisons are being made, but I really don't think that they're the best comparisons. And so I've thought about it a lot, and I've tried to figure out what do I think data, which resource is it most comparable to? And I really think it's water. You know, water is extremely plentiful, and we have tons of data, right? Some would say we're swimming in data, and others would say we're drowning in data. I think the second reason I would say they're similar is that even though we have a lot, the quality is highly inconsistent. And finally, I would say, depending on the use case, the quality is defined differently, right? The water I would use to wash a pair of muddy boots is very different than the water I would use to wash a bottle that I would feed a child with. But I think there's a big difference between data and water. Over time, we have realized that water is important to human existence, and we have invested in creating the fundamental foundation needed to make it a utility. And we can see the true economic impacts when water is not ubiquitously available as a utility. And I believe that that's where we need to go with data. You know, those statistics that you're quoting about how much time people spend on data cleansing or the original quality, I don't think we should be talking about that anymore. And if we really want to use artificial intelligence at scale, then I think we need to figure out how to make data a utility. So why do I think it really matters? When you take a look back at all major technological advancements, we've seen an exponential growth in what humans focus on. They have the ability to focus on a higher order and to truly invent amazing things and do things that people could not have imagined prior to those innovations. Prior to the advent of fire, the human existence was all about survival. Look how far we've come with each of these advancements. Electricity, X-ray machines, the power of flight. These are things that have transformed the human existence. And what have we done with that? We invented the computer. The ability to capture, compute, process, transfer information. And look at all the amazing things that have come from that since then. I really think we're at a pivotal moment here where AI is that next big innovation. And the transformation that humans will be able to make in a post-scaled, deployed AI, I don't even know what that's going to bring. But I know it'll be huge because this is so fundamental. But I really think that we are very limited today in our ability to get there. And this is a huge opportunity for us. The good news is I do see a lot of investment going into the areas of applying data science and artificial intelligence to data governance. I think it's a bit niche today. There's still a lot of companies going after it, but it's still a bit in silos. You know, we have great programs going on around using analytical data mastering or using machine learning to help us manage all of the data in our big data platforms. I think this is a big area and a huge opportunity for companies to be going after this space. Ultimately, I think that the most interesting thing about artificial intelligence is not what AI will do for us, because AI will do what we do today. The question is, what will we do when AI is actually deployed at scale? And when you look at some of the biggest innovating leaders, and leaders who've really leveraged the power of data, folks like Jeff Bezos that's pushing space exploration, or Ray Dalio who's pushing subsea exploration. Those are leaders who have invested in and understood the value of data, and now they are working on a higher order of innovation. So I think this is a call to action to all of you, leaders and influencers in this space. Are we going to be the generation that reinvents the wheel on AI and data? Or are we going to be the generation that actually starts to create the foundation that unlocks the next level of human evolution? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to these guys to bring us back to some more practical discussion on the topic.
Thanks, Christina. That was wonderful. You have introduced the topic at so many different levels, and what will really stay with me is your analogy around data and water. I think that's such a brilliant analogy that water flows all over the place, and I think the topic here around data quality is also like putting a dam around water so that you can harness the potential energy of water. Okay, that was a great kind of framework. Let's bring it down to more practical basis. Somu, you want to talk to us a bit about data quality? What are some of the challenges and some of things that you've tried in terms of improving data quality?
Thanks, Nitin. Hello. Yeah, thanks, Nitin. Thanks, Christina, for setting the stage. That was really awesome. And, the water analogy, I really loved it. And, we have to wonder, whether we'll have more water or more data, or probably have more data already if we can compare, if we can bring a comparable. So it's amazing. So thanks, Nasscom. Good to be here. We're all good to be here. I mean, I think this is, in the industry, from the industry point of view, I think this is probably the best time to be in data or to talk about anything on data. So you probably have noticed that everywhere, you open Economic Times, you open any magazine, any tech magazine or non-tech magazine, they're all talking about data, right? Because what they're predicting is by 2025, we will have like 180 zettabytes. I just learned about the zettabytes yesterday. I don't know whether you guys really know zettabytes or not. It's like 1 trillion gigabytes is 1 zettabyte apparently. So it's huge or humongous. It's a lot of data, right? We are talking about a lot of data, but again, every technology innovation you have seen, things move at different paces for different regions, different countries, different cultures, and this is no exception. Like for example, if you look at any innovation like client-server computing and all that, things have changed differently for different regions. And I think India is in a very good spot in the sense India can leverage and learn a lot from Western countries and a lot of innovations that happened in the Western countries in terms of data regulations, privacy, and all that. And I worked most of my career. I worked in US, and I think this is the right time to be in India in data, and that's why I'm here. And I'm guessing you're all here for the same reason. Let's get into my presentation. I'll try to keep it simple. We are talking about Trinity, the Trinity of ML AI. I love number 3. I think, in Hindu mythology, we have a lot of significance for number 3. And pretty much, if you can't summarize, in my opinion, something in 3 bullets or 3 slides, then you probably cannot summarize. So I think when you talk about data, when you talk about ML, AI, there are 3 things that come to my mind. Data and algorithms, and ML AI models or machine learning, whatever you call it, the 3 things, right? So again, these 3 things will have 3 bullets each, right? So I don't want to get into all these bullets, but out of these 9 bullets, today we are going to talk about 1 bullet, which is cleansing, right? Nitin mentioned that, how this is becoming more and more important, and how, people are like kind of did not know the importance of cleansing till actually they get into a data set or open a data set and start crunching, right? Everybody jumps onto algorithms first. They think like that's the coolest thing to do, blah, blah, blah. But quickly they will realize that the most important part of any machine learning project or AI project is actually about cleansing. We'll talk about that. So when you talk about data, initially, I think we usually focused on volume, velocity, veracity, or variety, whatever you call it. But I think the focus is changing now. The focus is changing to, is it clean? That is the focus. So let's get into why are we doing all this? Why are we actually crunching data? Why do you have to crunch data, right? We're crunching data for one reason. Everybody wants to get some insight out of their data. And when you look for it, you need clean data. And for example, I just took a consumer or a retail example where what we are looking for in data. We're looking for habits, we're looking for interests, we're looking for what the customer is looking for, what are the buying patterns, and we're looking for the basket sizes. Those are the insights. And we also eventually want to use this to provide hyper-personalization or a much better experience for the end user. When we think about that, what happens? When we provide best experience, they will be more willing to give more cleaner data. So what happens is you first cleanse your data, then you crunch it, come up with insights, give better experience. So people will be more willing to give better data, and because they'll be working a lot on your, on your digital products, they'll be using your digital products and all, so you'll get more data. So it becomes a cycle that Nitin mentioned, and I think that's the whole topic of this presentation. So this is how I think consolidation and insights will drive better insights. And again, the cleansing part, we're going to stress on that, and we're going to come back to that again later in the discussion. But I want to present few things, like why are we cleansing? Is it that important? How many of you are like data scientists here? How many of you are data engineers? Okay. Yeah, that's probably, yeah. So I think this is interesting, right? When we started client-server computing, you probably knew about like client engineers, UI developers, and server developers, people who focused on servers. But eventually, it became like full-stack developer. I think industry is going towards that in data too. I mean, we had data engineers, we had DevOps or like data ops, and then we had data scientists. Now, yesterday I've heard someone mentioning like full-stack data scientist. I was like, I've never heard of that. Full-stack data scientist. So that guy will clean and build a model and do everything, which is interesting, right? How many of you have been to business school? How many of you learned a lot of strategy in business school? So Nitin mentioned, right, we are going to focus on execution. That's because they don't teach execution in business school. So they don't teach data cleansing in schools. They don't, because nobody knows what kind of data set they're going to get their hands on. Like, till you actually open it, till it's just, I'm talking about first party data, guys, most of the time. But you imagine combining data sets. Imagine, doing multi-channel and getting, alternate data and all. So it just becomes very clumsy. If you ask anybody who ran a CDO or someone who ran a data science project will tell you that 60 to 80% of the time is consumed in cleaning the data. And approximately, I read in Gartner somewhere, 12 times more data engineers are there for each data scientist. But now we have full stack, so maybe we'll have like 6 full stack developers for that, right? So I think what's, I'll give you one prediction that I have. In the next 5 years, we'll have chief data janitor. What do we do? Like, they call it chief data officer. Like 80% of the time goes in how to clean the data, right? And there'll be like a chief data insights or whatever, that another role. The chief CDO role will be split into 2 parts. I'm just predicting that. Don't quote me anywhere. So better data is always beats fancier algorithms. You've probably seen it. It's like simple algorithm that you can get it from open source can get you 80 to 90% of the way if you have clean data. Yes, there is some fine tuning needed. That will happen in the last, and it will take time. It will not happen overnight. And why are we talking about this? This is so important because everybody that has a data cleansing problem today, they will throw manual labor at it, or data engineers at it. And they take forever to clean the data because it is so subjective, and you have to talk to in data science a lot. You have to understand the business use case to actually go clean it for your application. So And you can't wait for that because all our needs are real time. What good is data or insights if I do it after a year, right? It's completely useless. So that's why data cleansing is becoming more and more important. And unfortunately, most of the innovations happened on the machine learning algorithms and AI algorithms. But I think I see a change in the tide, and more startups are focusing on cleaning part. We'll talk about that later. It's not the most glamorous part for sure. So AI can help in many ways. I think we talked about AI, getting into pretty much everything that we do today, and cleansing is not an exception. And we'll get into these details, but I think 3 things stand out for me. Duplicates, which we all deal with a lot, and how to eliminate duplicates, whether it's names or the same entity has different names. For example, if banks merge or if banks do business with different entities of different business groups of a same company, then you will have all these challenges. I dealt all this with my fintech experience. I can tell you that it can get really messy. And then again, when it comes to missing data, many algorithms don't really accept missing data. So what we do is we either drop or we impute, right? You guys have done it. So it's common sense, but it doesn't work, because when you drop something, you're actually missing something, because there is a reason why probably that missing data is missing. There is an information there why it is missing. So you'll completely lose it when you drop that feature, right? I see a couple of nods, so I think people have been through these pains, right? So again, imputing also doesn't really help in most of the use cases. Categorical and numerical data, you deal it with differently. Again, I think the last thing I want to talk is diversity. Like, for example, if you want to build your data set as, with your internal data and external data, you bring in external data sets. It's very difficult to understand whether it is really trusted data or, how much you can trust the data, how you can mix and match. They will have a different way of defining a member and, talking about a member. All these challenges you do manually today, and AI can really help here, and the tools can help here, and open source can come up and do a lot of these innovations, so we can democratize that, like my fellow panel member talked about it, So there is a lot of room for improvement, and cleansing is going to be the most glamorous job going forward. I mean, we have a room for another C-level, right? So we can have so chief data janitor. Thank you.
Thank you, Somu. Thank you. That's fantastic. Christina gave us a big picture, and Somu, you have drilled the topic down beautifully. I think what will stay with me is the chief data janitor role. I love that. It's a very real thing, that 60-80% of project time spent on data cleansing. I think that's something for us to really consider. See, the normal imagery around AI is about supersonic speed, moving very, very quickly. But the reality of this process of making AI happen is that to go fast, to go far, you have to start slow. You have to start slow, and to make sure that we are building that data foundation. And I think Somu reinforced it many times that it's not really the glamorous part, but it is the essential part. Without that essential part, your journey will not stop. Somu, thank you so much. Rohit, over to you.
Thank you, guys. Good morning, everybody. It is interesting that we all got together just in the morning today, and we are talking about water. And interestingly, when I was in the meeting yesterday, in the way I work, we talk about data rivers and data lakes. So just interesting. So Edward Deming, the father of quality, once said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." I think if he were here, he would have said, "In God we trust, all others bring data that is accurate, complete, and large." So now that we got the morning gyan, the 10 o'clock in the morning, let's do a quick refresher on the big picture of where we are in terms of the AI. Again, the stats speak for itself. The impact of AI is huge. Retail, it's growing 300% in AI, from 2.2 billion to 7.3 billion. Jobs in AI, plus 450%. Tech spending, when you think about all the technology companies growing drastically, I think you can see the numbers here. Customer expectations, service, whether it's relationship, you're seeing, big time, customers expecting that AI will improve the customer service and improve on how we basically work with customers in terms of relationship. So what does it all mean? From an economic value creation point of view, what AI brings to the table is trillions. You can see the bubbles here, comes from the McKinsey and economics articles. Sales and marketing obviously is biggest, followed by operations or supply chains, which by the way is kind of my area that I operate in. So to warm up everybody, as we get into the conversations for today, I thought I'll share 2 case studies. It's maybe the case studies is not so cool. Typically when you think of AI in supply chain, you're thinking about automated vehicles, you're talking about drones, but something more fundamental is so important when we operate at scale. So let me show you how we can use AI to get data to actually improve AI and machine learning. So this example, and I'll just quickly, basically it talks about use robotics to get data to improve the ML/AI for inventory forecasting, replenishment, price accuracy, which can improve the associate experience and customer experience. There's a lot of data here, but basically, we have folks walking into the store, and they're doing inventory count, they're looking at pricing accurations, and what we're going to do is we're going to use robotics to actually cleanse the data and feed them back to machine learning. So I have a video here, so if you can roll the video, please.
When it comes to retail technology, we're pushing the boundaries of what is possible through robotics and AI. That's why we're excited about new shelf scanning technology we're testing in a small number of stores across the US. It simplifies routine work by using data and vision technology to find items that are out of stock, missed price changes, and missing labels. This helps our associates see where they can make the biggest difference for our customers. It also helps locate items and checks inventory levels on the shelf, broadening the assortment available to online grocery pickup customers and assisting our personal shoppers in filling orders. At Walmart, we're using technology to focus on tasks that are repeatable, predictable, and manual, freeing up associates to spend more time doing what they do best, serving you. When we combine the passion of our people with the power of technology, the possibilities are endless.
Case study number 2, I think, again, not very glamorous, as we were talking earlier. This is basics. You're in a store. We have large amount of online grocery. As you all know, Walmart is the biggest grocer in the world, and we're enabling a lot of online grocery. And when we get in, typically in an online grocery world, the basket size is big. So when an order drops in, we pick all the grocery items from the store. So the picker goes and basically chooses and picking the items in a particular time and frame. So in this example, basically, the problem space is how do you pick these items from a timely, from an efficiency, from an accuracy point of view? And what we did was we're basically approaching this in a pick optimization. I think if you're in supply chain, you know about pick optimization. But what we're doing is we're actually using data, like for example, the dimensions of the items, the number of items, the tote size, all this data in massive scale. We're actually using input of the data to cleanse up the internal data that is used by the algorithms. So again, it's so important that we think about, again, it talks about a bunch of computations and algorithms that we're using. But in sense, this is all about getting the data for picking and then passing it through the machine learning algorithms over time to distribute to basic pick paths. And the results speak for itself. Big time, speed, in terms of the walk time, reduction of walk time, and obviously the accuracy. So given these 2 cases, what I just wanted to kind of leave with you guys is 2 things. First is, what is the kind of the future concept state of applications when you think about AI in supply chain? This is really a pretty busy picture, I get that, but it kind of shows a big picture of how in the future the e-commerce, or commerce for that matter, in supply chain looks like. Obviously, we'll have automated warehouse reporting, we will have robotics, we will have drones, we will have all the things we talk about. But the challenge, I think, in the future for the folks who are in AI and data is, how do you bring this all together? I think data cleansing, using the AI to clean data and integrating all that into these applications of what we're trying to build is going to be super important. So what are some of the applications? I think just 6 boxes, I would say, is if you just look at inbound to outbound, from inventory planning to inbound to warehouse management or store operations, to transportation, last mile, robotics, from procurement and manufacture. I'm not going to read all the bullet points here, but I think there's so much applications around each of this world. And I'm going to leave you with one thought. I think the thought being, the key is to basically how do we enable users of AI or use of data to get accurate, unbiased data and integration of the data between systems. So that I think how much sophistication we can do in AI, but no level of sophistication will help if the data is not clean and the data is not accurate. So with that, we can hand over and get to the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rohit. Thank you so much. Accurate, complete, large. That's a very, very nice, simple way of summarizing what we want from data. That also, by the way, meets Somu's rule of three Dev. Okay, so Rohit has set the stage very nicely. He has, again, we have covered different levels, the big picture, more details, and then Rohit has helped us illustrate this for supply chain. Another thing which really struck me was that where is AI going to create value? A lot of the conversation is around marketing, but operations, as per the research that you showed, AI is going to create as much value. I think that was quite a nice insight. Okay, now I would like us to get more specific. This is about execution, yeah? So for each of my colleagues here, and Christina, starting with you, I'm going to ask the same question. Pick up one specific example of implementing AI from your experience and the challenge that you faced. The challenge that you faced, and then how did you overcome that challenge? Whether that was around data availability, data quality, or maybe something else to really kickstart this virtuous cycle of AI.
Sure. So, an area that's really important in our business is commodity spend. Right, so all the materials that go into the products that we make, it's important that we're getting the best pricing on that. But we're purchasing from suppliers globally. We're purchasing a lot of different commodities and a lot of different use cases for those commodities going into a lot of different parts. So keeping that information in sync, especially in a business where we've grown up with a lot of acquisitions, so maybe we have different engineering systems or PLM systems, as we call it, the parts lifecycle management. So taking that information, bringing it together for our sourcing teams is a challenge. And so we've been using machine learning to help us with analytical mastering of the data so that we can ultimately turn that back to those teams to make more effective negotiations and choices. And so for us, I think one of the challenges is the disparity of data, so across multiple systems, and the fact that we don't have common data models in all of those source systems. But I think another big challenge beyond the basics that the data is hard, I actually think that continuing data literacy with all of the stakeholders who need to be brought together when you're trying to apply some type of artificial intelligence, some type of data science to what you're trying to do. And so I think that's a big challenge that we need to all overcome is how do you make it easier to quickly onboard the entire community involved in driving the area, especially in a time where, depending on your technical background, the level of understanding is very varied. So I think, what we've tried to do is really actively partner the groups together and iterate. I mean, you're not going to solve something overnight, and so getting people attuned to the fact that this is going to be iterative has been a big help.
Fantastic. 2 specific challenges that I took away, Christina. One was around growth through acquisitions and therefore disparate systems. I think that's a problem that I see in many industries, and that's quite a challenge in terms of how you have master data management, consistent data. The second issue that you raised, which was again very interesting, around data literacy, which starts getting to the human aspect of making AI happen. Hold on to that thought because I want to come back to it. Somu, your big AI implementation challenge and how you overcame that.
Hello. So I think, yeah, I think Christina started off really well on two aspects, which are like, these are problems even if you don't grow through acquisitions, because data was there all along. The only thing is it was in silos, right? It was sitting somewhere, even like I've seen people keeping data on a desktop too, some data. So I think my fundamental, approach, like, not talking about much about AI, but about how do people understand that data privacy and regulations are really important, even though not enforced, actively or in India or in some countries. And I think that's one of the challenges. Even in US, I feel like it's not completely enforced. And so the fundamental thing is to bring that shift, because most of the CEOs, both in Western countries and here, they start tech and data, they really know that data can completely change the game. Because if you really look at it, if you look at Walmart or other companies, I don't call them retailers, they are data companies to me. And pretty much, every company in 10 years from now is going to be a data or an internet company. It'll be called, you have to call it that way. And it's all about data, right? So bringing that, I think the senior management or the C-levels bought into this really fast. They'll buy into this really fast. They have not already. But bringing that, what Christina pointed out, bringing that next level of stakeholders on board is not easy, because they've been living this dream of like manually doing things and not really, following all the rules and regulations. So that's like, to me, that's the number one challenge you face in any industry. I mean, if we still have that problem in US, a lot of retailers, a lot of, banks are still struggling. Even though they invest a lot in data and IT and other infrastructure, they still are struggling with the same core issues, which we are all struggling around the world. So that's one. And second is, to me, when you are exploring data, there are two ways of using data, using machine learning and AI and all. One is, you actually define a problem and go find a solution for that problem in your data, which is most of us do. I mean, you can start with a hypothesis, but until you actually look at the data and crunch the data, you don't even know what problem you have. A lot of people get that wrong. They think like, oh, we have a supply chain problem, and let's go figure it out. I'm not picking on you, but you get the point, right? We have some problem. Consumer engagement is the problem. Let's go solve it. You don't know what problem it is first. Don't define the problem. I mean, I always struggle with. I'm from a product management background mainly. Got into data like few years back, and I've always struggled. Who is doing product management in data in the company? Nobody, right? That is the CDO's role. You actually create that bridge between the senior CEO and the rest of the organization in terms of why are we doing all this? Why all of a sudden we're talking about using Google, Azure, or whatever it is, right, to run these models, build these models? Why are we creating these labs and all that? You are the one who should do that. That's a very difficult task, because all of a sudden all of them are looking at you as like, okay, so you're going to take 20% of all these 5 executives' job and you're creating another role for yourself. This is, that's the struggle you'll have. And also, don't define the problem, go find data, and then see what problems you have. Data will tell you a lot of things that nobody else can tell you.
Somu did not necessarily answer the question I asked, but he shared 2 very interesting insights. And his first insight was around the relevance, the importance of data regulations. Yeah, and how we can be lax about it. And now that we are looking at a very, very different volume of data, why it becomes very important. His second point, which is a brilliant point, is that the data that we have today allows us the opportunity for discovery and for problem definition. Thank you. Rohit, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. Yeah. So you talked about supply chain and how you have used AI to actually improve the data quality. Yeah. So help us double click on that. What kind of tools, what kind of platforms did you use for that? Given that there are many technologists in this room, give a little bit of a technology perspective on the how-to?
Very interesting question. I was just wondering how to answer that question given the disparate number of tools, the disparate number of platforms, the disparate number of systems that is used in a company like Walmart or any other medium to large size enterprises. I think for us, there are two aspects, right? One, for example, if I look at the case study of the pick path optimization, or I think we were talking earlier about how we're using machine learning to improve the routing. So we have an in-house routing engine solution that we use to route deliveries. You have so many systems. Ours is a very distributed systems architecture where it's all service oriented. So what happens is we have publishers of data or events, and they are just published in a whatever technology, whether it's Kafka, whether it's others, you just stream it, right? How do you harness the data, store it in a way, and then you have consumers of that data. And you have so many types of publishers, and it's unstructured data, it's structured data. You have different technologies that is publishing the data, from I would say not COBOL, but like mainframes to the web technology systems and so forth, right? So you have to have a way to harness this data which is coming in from different formats. And then you have different user groups from a consumption point of view. They're saying, you know what, I want to use X technology, whether it's a report they're generating, is it a data scientist that is trying to consume the data? And then they all think about, of their own things, because we want to keep it democratic, but in some cases you need to have some guidance.
Right.
So one of the challenges we get into is, how do you build a platform? We're undergoing this challenge is, how do you build a data platform that kind of outlives the leaders?
Got it.
Outlives, me, outlives, the CTOs and the CEOs. And also, secondly, who builds it? Is it a centralized team? Is it a decentralized team? Is it data science, who's heavy on data science? Because we know that if you democratize it too much, they will kind of use their own technologies. But if you keep it centralized, the centralized teams will never be able to keep pace with the domain knowledge that is constantly changing and evolving. And then you have the routing example, going back to that example was, you're riding a truck to make grocery deliveries. You have traffic patterns, weather patterns, you have doorstep times, you have item size, and you have SLA to meet the customer promise. So the technology in the back end is just a piece of it. There are all these distributed systems which are in different technologies that are coming back together. So I'll keep it at that, but we can definitely
I think that's
more.
a great point. That's a great point because my question was about tools to improve the data quality, and there are many out there. There's IBM, Informatica, and Trifacta, etc. There are many that are around. But actually, Rohit took that question to a different level and made a very, very interesting point that it is about creating an enterprise data platform. And most enterprises, organizations that I've seen, that's a huge problem. Building the enterprise data platform is a mega. It's not $1 million. It's a hundreds of $1 million, or a $1 billion problem. That who does it? How do you do it? Do you do it more use case by use case? Do you do it kind of more broadly? I think that's a very interesting set of perspectives that you opened up. Probably we do not have enough time to go deep into it. The last question for this panel before I open up for the audience, and Christina, I'll come back to you. So we talked about technology. I want to go back to the human aspect. And I know that you're very passionate about the human aspects of enabling AI. Can you share more thoughts on that? We talked about data quality and technology, but from a human perspective, what are some things that need to happen so that we can get this virtuous cycle of AI going?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm going to go back to the topic of data literacy. Right, I think that what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is significantly more investment in universities and high schools and ultimately elementary schools in data literacy as core curriculum areas. And I think that if we don't, or I think those, those schools that don't, or those communities that don't invest that way, will find that over time there's going to be huge socioeconomic impacts from that not being a fundamental part of the evolution of this. And maybe not in the next 5 to 10, but I would definitely say over the next 20 years. That's got to be a fundamental part of this. I think another is, I was looking at and very fascinated by the video from Walmart with the machine, and what it's doing is the company has realized it's important to reduce the amount of time it takes for the picker to go get that. In the physical world, we have all bought into the concept of actually spending time on driving process efficiency. But we don't do that in a wing-to-wing data process, right? We haven't applied that. Chief data janitor is it sounds funny, but it's actually right. I believe there's a whole host of roles that haven't been defined yet, right? Like, what about a quality leader that's not testing data quality of a data domain or a data object, but rather a process engineer who's taking the whole flow and saying, hey, it's meaningful for us to take minutes or hours or days or months out of this data process. I mean, I think that there's an entire world of economic value to be had, but we haven't really internalized, I think, broadly, that in a digital world, data is the raw material. You would never run a successful plant in a supply chain the way that we do. We treat physical assets very different than digital assets today, and I think that'll be a big shift in culturally in terms of what we need to do to be able to get where we want to go from an artificial intelligence standpoint. Ultimately, though, what do I think the humans will do when we have deployed AI? I think that's a ways away, unless we actually commit to making this a priority. And we are the influencers who can do that, right? But I think it's a ways away. To be honest, I have no idea what we're going to do, but I know it's going to be amazing because every time humans have just done things that no one could have imagined before. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. On that positive, uplifting, amazing tone, let us move to the audience. Your questions. Okay, I see hand here. Mike. Yes, sir. In brief.
Sure. So I have a question which I assume Somu might be facing these days, is how to get the last person in a retail store to be a data visionary, right? We talk about the leaders, but how to tell the last guy that you have to do this one more scan so that I can use it after 3 years as a data pathway for me. So how to encourage those last guys, those last sales managers, those last brand managers? Thank you.
So this is probably one of the things where I don't have a 3-bullet answer. This is 1-bullet answer, economics. You show them the value that what is happening in the field. I mean, I've seen so many stores. We are opening 10,000 stores and we have 1,000 already. It's called Easy Day or Nilgiris or whatever. It's amazing how the employees in the store love technology and love to be associated with technology, love to see how they benefit from that. Ultimately, economics drive everything. So I think create value, show them why you're doing it and how they can benefit, everything will fall in place.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Right in. Okay, there.
I have a question. Thanks for sharing your insights. We believe that AI is extremely powerful today, but the sad part is even hackers see a lot of opportunity there. What are the kind of threats that they can pose to the industry, and how are we prepared for it?
So I don't know whether you have read the Economic Times today. IBM did a survey and they mentioned that data breach is least expensive in India, or the cost of a data breach is least in India compared to all these other Western and even China. So, so I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's going to be wild, wild west everywhere, and that's what is happening now. And it's going to be much more. What I'm really worried about is how haves and have-nots, that gap is going to increase with data and access to these algorithms that we are talking about. India is already, in that part we probably are number 1 in the world, haves and have-nots. So, and data is going to increase the gap further. And like my friend talked about, Rohit, building a platform and all that. But the problem is, if you really want to do it right, you have to bring in 10 vendors at least to build the right platform for right insights. No, none of these vendors have everything. So who can afford that? Only the best companies or the rich in the world, right? So those guys will benefit more. So I'm more worried about that than breaches.
I would add something too. I mean, I think that is an important risk, and I wouldn't want to underestimate that. But I think when you're operating in a world, businesses that are driven on algorithms, their biggest decisions, we cannot also underestimate that if you have poor data quality, the outcomes out of those models could be potentially dangerous, especially as you move into more industrial applications. And so I think this has got to become a true imperative, because there's potential risks that could come from those models having, not having appropriate model governance standards around them and having the right underlying quality there. So I think that's another component of the risk that we need to be preparing for and putting value in.
I think the one thing I would add is also to your question is, if you go and look back in some of the use cases of autonomous vehicles, and I don't know how many of you remember, but there have been cases where reporters, at least back in the US, have actually hacked into autonomous cars or cars that are talking to each other and have been able to control the car. In fact, I remember the Consumer Report, which is a trade magazine, a very respected trade magazine in the US. Their reporters actually tried it out and actually asked a software hacker in a legitimate way to hack and get control, and he freaked out knowingly that it is being hacked. So I think that's a good one example, nothing against that industry, because we think it's super important to advance. But we have to keep these things in mind, and we have to be very careful about how do you put privacy, security, cognizance of the data, and also be cognizant that, how much control we give away at the start. And I think one of the things we've been discussing internally is how do you first inform, assist, and automate? Because if you just jump to automation, you run the risk of just letting go of the control and get into these kind of scenarios. So,
okay, question there.
Hello. So Mike, I have two questions. First question is related to the scalability. So before 2 years back, I have hardly 2 or 3 machine learning models in my productions. But if you see now, there are n number of models running in my productions. So as per the discussions, what we are planning and what is the upcoming time, the hundreds will be moving to thousands or even more. So how to maintain that much of machine learning, deep learning models in production environment without crashes? So how far we are ready to maintain that scalable environment?
I mean, for me, this is a recurring theme, but I believe we have to build the right guardrails around our data supply chain, right? And so, you'll see in a lot of the banks where they're heavily using algorithms, and that's not really new for some of their biggest decisions. They have very strict model governance standards and maintain very detailed inventories of the models that they've developed. And I think that needs to become more ubiquitous. We need to understand that more. That should be probably, you could see that across more industries. Obviously the financial services industry is heavily regulated, and that drives some of that. Maybe in a world where we're really deploying AI at scale, we do need some level of regulation or even a high level of regulation to make sure that we are using it in the best possible way to advance human experience versus making it a danger.
Just in interest of time, I think we'll just take the last question. You had 2 questions, but you had your 1 question. Last, I think somebody here.
Here.
Okay, yes.
I have a question on data ownership. So Rohit, Christina, if you could share some perspectives on who really owns data. Now, one is within an enterprise, is it IT, is it business, is it something else that needs to own data? Second is, let's say I have bought an autonomous car and it crashes, right? Who gets sued? Is it the car company that owns the data? Is it me as an individual? Is it the transmission company that transmits data? How does data ownership work?
So let me take the first question first, which is probably the easier of the 2 questions.
In 30 seconds.
Of course. I think the way we think about it is there are 2 ownership models. One is the data team, or the team that actually stores it, the data warehouse team or the data analytics team that is actually storing the data. There's a model where you can say, there's an option which says that they are the owners of the data, and they're applying the business logic to produce the report that you want. Our philosophy, and what I see is, that is a very slippery slope, because a centralized enterprise team with the best of intent, with the best of skills, I think cannot keep pace with the speed and the change that happens in the domain teams themselves. So the way we are approaching is the domain teams that publishes the data has to have the ownership of the data and the complexity of the data. They simplify it and push it into the enterprise data systems. And those data systems then kind of use it to produce the reports. I think that's one part of the question. The second about cars, I wish we had all had the answers. And that's a huge debate that is going on right now. I don't think anybody has agreed or figured out where does it, I mean, the accidents or the events that happened with the cars, the accident when somebody got run over the other day, I think it was an Uber driver, I believe, that was trying out. I don't think as a culture, as a society, we have solved that problem yet. I don't know if you want to add something.
I think we are out of time. I think we are out of time. So, I would really like to bring the session to a close. Yeah, he's already standing there with the gifts in hand. You need to get the gifts. Let me try to summarize, some key takeaways. This whole discussion was about strategy to execution. Yeah, how do we make AI happen? And let me go through my colleagues and share 2 insights each, which I'm taking away from each one of them. So Christina shared her 2 big insights. First was, think of data as water. It's too much, it's all over the place, but how do you make it useful? So you need to put the dams, which will help you harness the power of data. I thought that was a brilliant, powerful imagery. I think the second thing she brought out was the human aspect around data. So the importance of data literacy. The importance of data literacy and driving that across the organization. Somu, I think his contribution for the day was coining a new CXO title, Chief Data Janitor. That's brilliant. And I think that's very real. That's very real, that I think the insight he shared, that 60 to 80% of time spent on analytics, AI initiatives is just around data cleansing. I think that's a great, great insight. I think the second insight that I took away, which I think there was a question as well, was around data privacy, data regulation. I think it is shocking that, for the volume and velocity of data that we are now handling, how in many well-known organizations, the data regulation is still pretty primitive. Yeah. Rohit, my 2 insights from him. First was the very simple way he described the data expectation: complete, accurate, large. Yeah. And the second thing was, don't think about data quality just in a very tactical way. You need to really think about it as creating a high-quality enterprise data platform. Yeah, and I think that's a holy grail problem that many of us deal with. A lot of insights, very happy to bring it all for you. My final thing for you, if there was a governing thought that I would want you to take away, it is AI is about speed, but to go fast, to go far, you need to start slow. And that start slow is building very, very solid, sound data foundations. Thank you very much.
Let's bring it on, ladies and gentlemen. Put your hands together for the next 3 amazing, insightful panelists and a moderator.